I raised my daughter alone after her father walked out. Every school play, every scraped knee, every late-night fever, I was there. I worked 2 jobs, skipped meals, and wore thrift store clothes so she could have new ones. Then, one spring afternoon, I heard she was engaged, not from her, but through a Facebook post. At first, I thought it was a mistake. A missed call. A lost letter. But when I asked her directly, she looked me in the eye and said, "It's for the best. Your kind of life doesn't fit with what we're planning." She didn't want her mother, her only living parent, at her wedding because she was embarrassed of me. My work-worn hands, my small apartment, my plain clothes, all of it was too shameful for her new life. Before I tell you what happened next, take a second to like, subscribe, share this story, and drop your name and location in the comments. You might get a shout-out in our next video. Today's shout-out goes to Martha from Ohio. Thanks for staying with us. I walked away from that conversation knowing one thing: would not beg for a seat at a table where I was unwelcome. The day of her wedding came, bright and sunny. I didn't put on a dress. I didn't sit in a pew. I didn't even peek at the photos. While she stood in white lace, smiling for cameras, I was in my kitchen sipping tea, the same way I'd done every morning for 30 years. No tears. Just quiet. A neighbor mentioned that the groom's family came from money, the kind of people who wore pearl cufflinks and had silver spoons in their mouths. "She's marrying up," they said with a nod. I said nothing. What my daughter didn't know was that a year earlier, after a health scare, I'd updated my will. Everything I'd worked for, my savings, my small rental property, and the cottage I inherited from my parents, was set to go to a dear friend who had cared for me when I was sick. I figured, if my own child couldn't bear the sight of me, she didn't need my legacy. That day, the vows she made weren't the only promises sealed. I made my own, that I would live the rest of my life without bending to her shame. It was barely a year later when the first call came. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask how I'd been. She just launched into complaints about her husband. "He's different," she said, her voice brittle. "And his family. They treat me like I'm a guest, not part of them." I listened. She went on about how her mother-in-law criticized her cooking, how the house, their house, wasn't really hers, how her husband had started locking his phone. Then came the real confession: they've cut me off from the accounts. I have to ask for grocery money. I let her speak, but I didn't rush to comfort her. She had built her castle, brick by brick, without me, and now the walls were closing in. Over the next few months, her tone changed. Each call carried more desperation. She hinted that maybe she'd made a mistake. She asked if I'd come visit. She even asked about the cottage. But she still never said the words I needed to hear: "I'm sorry." And without those words, the door to my heart, and my will, stayed firmly shut. One summer afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer. Later, a voicemail came through. "Mom. I need to see you. It's urgent. Please, call me back." I didn't. 2 weeks later, my old neighbor from the city rang. "Your daughter's been knocking on doors around here, asking if anyone knows where you've gone," she said. "Looks like she's desperate." By then, I was living quietly in my country home, acres of fields, the smell of pine through my windows, no traffic, no gossip. I hadn't told her about the move. The only people who knew were a handful of trusted friends, and the woman I'd left everything to. That evening, I sat on my porch watching the sun sink behind the hills. I imagined her frustration, retracing her steps through streets I no longer walked, realizing I'd disappeared from the life she had once shut me out of. She thought she could find me, smooth things over, maybe inch her way back into my will. But I'd already made peace with my choice. And the cruelest part of my revenge? I didn't have to raise my voice, slam a door, or send a cutting letter. I simply didn't show up. It was nearly 2 years after the wedding when the final blow landed. A mutual acquaintance, someone who still moved in both of our worlds, let it slip. She found out, they said over the phone, about the will. Apparently, she'd gone to a lawyer, assuming she was still listed as my sole beneficiary. The meeting ended with her in tears when she learned everything, every dollar, every property, every heirloom, had been legally transferred to someone else years ago. Word spread quickly in her circles. To her husband. To his family. The same people she'd once been so desperate to impress now knew she'd been cut out completely. I imagine it was a humiliation she never saw coming. I didn't take joy in her pain, not exactly. But there was a certain satisfaction in knowing the truth was out. That she had gambled our relationship for appearances, and lost more than she ever expected. I still live here, in my quiet country home, surrounded by friends who value me for who I am. And she, well, she learned that doors you close out of shame aren't always waiting for you to reopen them. If you enjoyed or could relate to T's story, hit like, comment, share and subscribe to our channel for more of such silent but potent revenge.